1059 The Region, in partnership with RE/MAX Prime Properties, present On the Market, real estate advice that works for you. Have a real estate question? Call us at 416-335-1059. Tweet us at 1059 The Region or email us at info@1059theregion.com.
This is 1059 The Region. I'm Tina Cortez with On the Market, York Region's exclusive radio real estate show. My co-host and our real estate expert is Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties. Good morning, Asif.
Good morning, Tina. And our first guest is a familiar name to our audience. Ben Myers, president of Bullpen Research and Consulting, is back with us with this headline: Rents will continue to rise in 2022. Ben, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again.
Now, Ben, what can you tell us about the headline about rents rising in 2022?
Yeah, so rentals.ca put out their forecast for rental markets across Canada this week, and really the focus and the conclusion was that we think rents are going to continue to go up. I mean, I think we've discussed previously when I've been on with you guys that the pandemic has I want to say stopped, but it's we're ignoring it more than we ever have before. People are going back to work. There's much more demand for downtown rentals than there was in the past. Graduating classes are starting their first jobs, or maybe not starting their first jobs, but the jobs that they already started, they're going to the office, so they're wanting to be closer to their place of work. We've got immigration, coming in at really record pace now, so it's increasing the demand. And as you know, being in the resale housing market, interest rates are going up. The resale market is starting to soften. So it's, sending more people back into the rental market or keeping them in the rental market.
And Ben, is this all about supply and because it's so low that the demand is so high?
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about the supply situation really ad nauseum. We're just not delivering enough supply in the Greater Toronto area and in many of the cities across Canada to keep up with demand. Supply can't be just evaluated on a per unit basis. It needs to be evaluated on a per bedroom basis and a square foot basis. So. When some people, when they look at the number of units, say, well, the units that are being built are similar as they were a few years ago, and even 10 years ago, but those unit sizes are significantly smaller. So it's not really, allowing the market to get the supply needed for families, and it's not supplying some of those larger units for several roommates to live together. So. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough supply, and we've got excess demand in the rental market, and that's gonna cause rents to go up.
And again, something else that we've discussed is the return of the student to in-school universities. And as we start to see the downtown core really start to repopulate with businesses getting back to in-person work and schools getting back to in-class learning, how much of that do you feel contributes to a downtown core's problem with supply and also with rents increasing?
Yeah, I mean, students are a huge driver of demand for rental products. So, obviously with Ryerson, University of Toronto, Toronto Metropolitan University, Ryerson, several colleges downtown, they're all getting back. I mean, I did my first in-office presentation for a client this past week, and I rode the subway, and it was jammed. So, people are going back downtown, and students are filling up, and they're taking a lot of those small units and those less expensive units in the market because that's all that they can afford. So, definitely a big driver and continue to be so.
And those are all good signs, right? Seeing public transit full, seeing the downtown core busy. But what about, the smaller cities where people kind of went to for cheaper rents? Is that still happening there?
Yeah, it's just a little bit hard to tell. I mean, when you're looking at some of these smaller municipalities, the sample sizes are just so small, right? And so when you're evaluating, year over year or month over month, it's really hard to tell if the changes are, because of the change in the composition of the sample or because, people are not wanting to live there. I mean, a lot of surveys are showing that not all a lot of employees, or the majority of employees, want a hybrid work situation, right? So if they're only going to the office once a week or twice a week, then it allows them to potentially live in some of these smaller communities and pay those cheaper rents. But I think it's still a little too early to say, what's going to happen with some of those smaller municipalities, because there was a lot of people that moved out to the Kitchener, not that Kitchener, Waterloo, or London or Kingston are necessarily smaller communities, but they moved to those cities from the Greater Toronto area. So it will be interesting to see if there's any pullback in rents in those areas after they actually experienced increasing rents during the pandemic, whereas some of the bigger municipalities in Canada experienced major declines.
As the market continues to soften or cool, do you see investors scooping up these properties and increasing the rent pool?
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, it really depends on how fast it's going down, right? I think, anytime there's a softening market, you get less investors, right? I think they want to get an idea of how far this thing is going to go down, right? They don't want to be in a negative equity situation or negative cash flow situation. So I think it's probably a little too early to say that investors are going to jump back in and buy some of those cheaper properties, just because the market it's just now starting to go down, and we really don't know how far it's going to go down. Obviously, there was really no other way to describe it. It was bubble-like conditions in February and March, pricing going up 20, 30% year over year. In some markets, 40 and 50% year over year. So that's quite an increase. So I think if you are an investor, that you have to be very cautious at this point in time, because you might view it as a great opportunity, but maybe your appraisal doesn't come in, or you can't get the financing for that unit, and you might be in a precarious situation. So I think in the short term, I think we'll see less investors than we certainly had earlier in the year in late 2021. And then as we get to a point where the market has flattened or been a little bit more stable for a couple months, I think you'll see the investors jump back in.
Ben, can you take us across the country, to the major cities? What are the rent increases in those areas?
Well, I mean, we haven't released the latest national rent report for April, but I can give you a sneak peek in what's happening. So, Vancouver continues to be the strongest market. Rents are up 3.3% month over month in April over March. So huge rent growth. So the average condominium apartment or rental apartment is almost $2,750 a month in Vancouver. So that's over $450 more than Toronto. So those markets used to be neck and neck, but Vancouver is really taking over as the top market for rents. And actually, going into the next few cities, Etobicoke, Mississauga, North York, and Scarborough. So some of the most expensive markets across Canada are all in Ontario. So really interesting to see that. We've actually seen Halifax rents go down a little bit. There was a lot of former Nova Scotians that had moved to Ontario for jobs that have moved back to Halifax, and they were experiencing some big rent growth, and the government was even considering banning or taxing non-residents. So anyone that was buying that wasn't a current resident of Nova Scotia. So interesting to see that. So it really is interesting. I mean, the prairies have actually seen some pretty decent growth. The Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Regina, whereas they had been fairly flat for a really long time. But the oil boom apparently is back, and I think that will create some jobs and create some additional demand for rental units.
And we can certainly look forward to more inventory across the country with those numbers. Ben, do you think the $10 billion idea about increasing supply is going to actually happen? Is it realistic?
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think there's the political will there to make big changes. The voter base is the percentage of owners in Canada is 70%. They want to quote unquote protect their investment, and so they're aligned with prices continue going up, right? There's a lot of NIMBYs out there that don't want renters in their community or less affluent people in their community or shadows, or they want to keep the neighborhood character. They don't want busy streets. They don't want busy transit. So there's all these things that pushing back against adding supply in the marketplace. So I just don't see the political will to actually make real changes to the zoning system in this anywhere in the major cities in Canada. So I think in the long term, we'll continue to see prices trend up and affordability worsen across the country.
Ben, great insight as always. Thanks so much for joining us again. If people want to read more about the rental reports, where can they find them?
Yeah, so if you go to rentals.ca, they have a national rent report. You can see what's happening on a monthly basis. They do some additional blogs. They did a big blog post on forecasts for the year and looked at asked other experts across the country what they thought was happening. If people want to go to bullpenconsulting.ca, I have some interesting stuff out there on land prices and condo prices and my podcast, Toronto Under Construction.
Thanks so much, Ben. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
After the break, the home equity tax petition. This is On the Market on 105.9 The Region. Stay with us.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KHAN. That's 416-985-5426. Or email asif@thehomeshop.ca. Now, back to On the Market on 105.9 The Region.
Welcome back to On the Market, York Region's exclusive radio real estate show on 105.9 The Region. I'm Tina Cortez, and of course, our real estate expert is Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties. And Asif, you have our next guest.
I do, Tina. Joining On the Market now is Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome to On the Market, Franco.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on today.
Franco, before we get into asking everyone to sign the No Home Equity Tax Petition, tell us a little bit about the work that the Canadian Taxpayers Federation does.
Well, absolutely. So we are a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization. We've been around for about 30 years here in Canada, and we have a very simple but I think very powerful mission, and the fight for taxpayers. Especially these days, you got these politicians who are racking up these massive debts. You got these politicians who seem like they're tripping over themselves looking at new types of taxes. And we think that Canadians work hard, already pay enough taxes, so we're here to fight for lower taxes, and we're here to make sure the governments don't waste all of our money.
Well, speaking of taxes, as Asif mentioned, the Federation is currently asking Canadians to sign the No Home Equity Tax Petition. Tell us about the CMHC study and proposal.
Yeah, so right now, fortunately, Canadians do not pay a home equity tax, right? So it means that when you sell your home, you do not have to pay a tax on the proceeds of the sale. And that is fundamentally a good thing. A home equity tax could come in here and could cost Canadian tens of thousands of dollars. And why it's so damaging is think of people like your parents or maybe your grandparents who worked their whole lives, who maybe don't have a ton of money in a pension fund or a ton of money through their TFSAs, and they're relying on the sale of their home to be their nest egg. Well, you have the government through its crown corporation, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, that is actively funding research to look into a home equity tax. They're using our own money, $250,000 plus, to study a home equity tax, and we think that it would just be so damaging for Canadians' parents, grandparents, but even younger Canadians who are trying to get into the market.
And Canadians have always been a different breed when it comes to home equity and paying off mortgages. And we've always been taught by our parents and even through Canadian financial institutions and the systems they put through that, hey, the best thing to do is try and pay off your mortgage as quick as you can. Build that equity. That's your money. And we've always done that and put money into our mortgages and established equity and gained equity in our homes. And now that's at risk.
Yeah, I know, and that's what's so unfair, right? Because you're taught to do the little things right, or you're taught to work hard, be able to put a roof over your family's head, and not only is that a good thing in and of itself, but that you'll be able to rely perhaps on the proceeds of that to fund your retirement, right? For so many Canadians, their homes are their nest eggs, right? They sell their family home and they hope to live on that money in retirement. Let me give you a concrete example. And by the way, we have a home equity tax calculator online where you could go in, put how much money you bought your home for, what you think you'd sell it for, and it'll show the tax bill that could come with it. But let me give you an example. Let's say your parents or your grandparents, they bought their home in the Toronto area for about $250,000 back in 1980. Let's say they sold it today for $1.2 million, which is a reasonable sale price these days. Well, they could end up paying anywhere between $50,000 all the way up to $190,000, depending on a home equity tax proposal.
What are the benefits? What could possibly be the benefits of this home equity tax then?
It's absolutely mind-boggling. So the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, again, that's a federal crown corporation, and according to their own website, they have one overarching objective, and that's housing affordability. Well, they funded this report with $250,000 of our tax money, trying to look at ways to improve housing affordability. Well, one of the recommendations in this housing affordability report was a form of a home equity tax. And they're trying to make the case that somehow, if they hammer Canadians with a home tax, well, this might cool off the market. But it just doesn't even make sense. In fact, you have to read the entire report to see that the authors of the report even acknowledge that a home equity tax could increase the cost of living, and it could do that in a few ways, which are pretty common sense. Well, number one, the tax could just be added on to the sale price, right? Pretty common sense. The same way that carbon taxes make gasoline prices more expensive, the same way that sales taxes make essentially the price of everything more expensive. Well, that could be the same way a home equity tax would make home sales more expensive. But there's another way that a home tax can make home prices more expensive, and that's by reducing supply. And it could do that in two ways, or at least one way. You have the buyer or the seller may not want to sell the home, so they may want to avoid paying the tax, and that reduces supply, increasing the price. But also, you might see some buyers trying to avoid a home equity tax threshold by purchasing more modest housing. Well, of course, that would increase demand for these modest homes and increase the price to people who are looking to purchase more modest homes. So the CMHC is supposed to be looking at housing affordability, and that's why it's so mind-boggling that it's using our own tax dollars to fund a report that is recommending a form of a home equity tax.
And it's no secret that our gross domestic product for Canada, the majority of it is made up by resale housing in Canada. Now, when you look at the taxes that homeowners are already paying, or home buyers are already paying, they've got land transfer tax, they've got HST on services, they've got HST on improvements, there's property taxes. Now, this is almost a tax on tax. And, how is that supposed to help Canadians in terms of affordability? Because you're adding a tax to someone at the height of their career, or when they're trying to retire and try to save up this money or take money out to fund their child's purchase through the bank of mom and dad. How does the CMHC even think that this would be considered an actively relevant tax to fund anything?
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-boggling, and not to bring to make the story about myself, but let me give you a little reason why this really boils my blood when I hear about the government funding a report on a home equity tax. It makes me think about my own mother, who for many years she was a single mother raising my younger brother and sister. She worked very hard her whole life. Now she finally has a home in southern Alberta, and now I hear about the government funding this report, talking about going after the proceeds of the sale of potentially her home. Now, how is that going to help my family? What if I'm looking to buy a house in the future and I need assistance from my parents? Well, how will this tax, taking away money from the sale of my mom's proceeds, her nest egg, how is that going to help me? Of course, it won't. Now, I do want to point out the fact that we do have a housing affordability crisis here in Canada. The last numbers that I saw last year was that the average home price increased by 20%. But to your earlier point, the issue is all these stifling regulations, stifling taxes. The key to improving housing affordability is to build more homes, not to raise taxes. Now, there is a groundbreaking report from the C.D. Howe Institute that calculates the cost of all these government regulations. In a place like Vancouver, these different regulations, these different charges, these different taxes can add $640,000 onto a home price. So if you want to make it more affordable for people to build homes and, of course, move into homes, then we got to cut this red tape and we got to cut all these taxes.
And Franco, for years, we've heard reports that the government has been denying working on a home equity tax and playing it down until the report came out that CMHC had funded this report. Have you been in touch with anyone at the government level as to where this came from and how it was put through?
Yeah, I mean, we keep trying to get answers from members of parliament, but members of parliament within the government party essentially say, well, arm's length corporation, what are we going to do about it? But that's not a good answer. I mean, you're our politicians, you're our representatives, you should be putting a stop to it.
And Franco, what has reaction been to the petition posted by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation?
It's been absolutely massive. We've had over 200,000 petition signatures, and I'm not shocked. This is a huge issue. Like I said, it really boils my blood that the government can even funding a report that considers coming after people who worked hard their whole lives and who rely on the nest egg to fund their retirement years. So I am not surprised that so many Canadians are outraged. And like I said, more than 200,000 petition signatures.
Franco, this has been quite the eye-opener. Before we let you go, tell our listeners where they can find the home equity tax calculator and also where they can read up more about what your federation does.
For all of that stuff, you can go to taxpayer.com. We have a bunch of tabs at the top. Check out our newsroom to see all the different articles and all the different research that we're putting out there, constantly pushing for lower taxes and being the watchdog on government spending. But then for the home equity tax petition, there's a tab that says petitions right at the very top. Just click that link and you'll be able to find that very easily.
Franco, thanks so much for your time, and we look forward to having you on again with an update as to how we're doing with this petition.
Well, that'd be great, and thanks so much for having me on today.
Yes, please keep us posted and let us know about next steps. When we come back, your real estate questions and the hot listing brought to you by Souk, simplifying the home ownership experience. This is On the Market on 105.9 The Region. Stay with us.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KHAN. That's 416-985-5426. Or email asif@thehomeshop.ca. Now, back to On the Market on 105.9 The Region.
Welcome back to On the Market, York Region's exclusive radio real estate show on 105.9 The Region. Time now for our listener questions. John in Thornhill wants to know if you think the buyer's market is on the horizon and if you should wait because prices will drop. Asif, this one is obviously for you.
And this is a great question because I'm probably asked this 3 or 4 times a day. And it is certainly changing in terms of the heat of the seller's market over the last few years. But we are very far off from being in a buyer's market. And what I mean is we need about 6 months of inventory for it to change from a normal market to a buyer's market. A very heated market is a seller's market, and that is usually between 1 and 4 months of inventory. But when you start getting into 4 to 6 months of inventory, that's a pretty balanced market. And then for it to change, we need more than 6 months of inventory. We don't have that. We are very, very low on inventory, even with the way that inventory has increased right now. We're looking at maybe 3 months in certain areas. However, it's not enough to make it a buyer's market. And what's happening is because of the low inventory levels, you're still starting to see prices increase. So with prices increasing, with the threat of interest rate hikes coming up, the best time to buy for buyers is right now. This is your window of opportunity because if you wait and prices go up 10 or 12%, you've lost that much buying power.
Okay, so you've covered John's questions. It's not quite a buyer's market, and prices have not yet dropped. Would you call it a cooling of the market, though, right now?
Yeah, it's definitely cooler. It definitely is cooler than it was, again, over the last 4 months or so, even over the last 2 years, the COVID period. It's cooler in the sense that there seems to be less activity because there's a lot of people sitting on the fence. They don't know whether to list right now or hold off. They don't know whether to buy right now or hold off. However, that's causing, another strain on our inventory levels, and in turn, that increases prices.
Our next question comes from Josie in Richmond Hill. How does she know if her house is priced right? While she knows the days of bidding wars may be over, she doesn't want to undersell either. Asif, what do you think?
Another great question. And the reality is you will never undersell, because if you are priced too low, you're going to have 15, 20, 30 people lined up at your door to try and get into this property. So although there's less bidding wars right now, you're still getting bidding wars on, deals that people think are out there, or homes that really stand out above and beyond the rest in the area. So you're still getting bidding wars there. They haven't gone away. But the best way to judge your price point is to take the market value of the property and see where you're at. If you're under listing, you could, and putting an offer date on it, you could face the reality that when it comes to the offer date, you may only have 3 or 4 offers and may not get to the price that you want to get to. And it depends on what that price is that you want to get to. If it's something that 1 or 2 of your neighbors achieved during the really hot pandemic period, that's not true market value. That's what someone paid. It was an emotional decision during a bidding war that someone decided to pay in order to secure that property, but it may not be the true market value. So the best thing to do is take a look at the numbers, drop the highest 2 and the lowest 2, and then figure out what the true market value is for your area and price right around there. Because if you undercut it, you may not get the results you want. Unless your house really shows spectacular, then you're, again, like I said in the last answer, you're going to have people lined up to purchase that property.
As a reminder, you can send your questions anytime to info@1059theregion.com. But Asif, if our listeners prefer to contact you directly, how can they do that?
They can reach me on my cell at 416-985-CON. That's 416-985-5426.
Now, just before we go, the On the Market hot listing brought to you by Souq. That's SOUQH, simplifying the home ownership experience. Asif, over to you.
We're going to go to a condo, a 2-bedroom condo in Midtown Toronto. So this is at Don Mills in Eglinton. It is right pretty much across the street from the new LRT line. So there's a stop right in front of the building, just steps away. You've got amenities galore. You've got indoor amenities, outdoor amenities. It's a very centrally located property. It's at 2 Sonic Way, which, again, it's a couple of minutes to the DVP. The Gardner's a few minutes away. You go up the street, Don Mills, you can get up to Fairview Mall. You've got everything pretty much right around you. The Science Center's right there. There's so much happening in that corridor right now. And this is a 2-bedroom property, and it's priced at $800,000. This is a larger condo, and it has a parking spot too. It's very rare for Toronto condos around the $800,000 mark for a 2-bedroom to include a parking spot, but this one does have one.
So this is a good idea, you would think, for an investor or first-time buyer?
This would be great for first-time buyers to get their foot in the door. This property was owned by a first-time buyer. When they first moved in, you can have an investor who may want to rent out to people that work in the area. With the LRT right there now, you've got so many different options. And with it going right across Eglinton, there's so much that's happening in that area. There's so much going on. It's so convenient with transit and with accessibility to highways. So this would be for a young family that wants to move into a 2-bedroom place instead of having like a 1-bedroom condo that they were in. It's got a balcony as well. It's got great views. It's on the 20th floor. It is absolutely a spectacular condo.
Asif, the list price and where our listeners can get more information.
The list price on this 2-bedroom condo at Tucsonic Way is $799. And for more information, Tina, they can contact me at 416-985-5426. That's 416-985-KON.
If you missed any part of our show, go to 1059theregion.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. I'm Tina Cortez. Thank you for listening.
Need to connect with Asif Khan from RE/MAX Prime Properties? Call him 416-985-KON. That's 416-985-5426 or email asif@thehomeshop.ca.